Story 1. The Siberian Ripper, the White Ghost of Russia. When police forced open the door to apartment 357 inches, the Siberian city of Novokuznetsk, they had no idea they were stepping into a waking nightmare. The stench hit first a thick, metallic rot. Blood stained the floor in uneven patches. And in the middle of that chaos sat Alexander Spesivtsev, perfectly still, staring straight at them. No struggle, no fear. Just calm, the kind of calm that freezes you to the bone. The man behind the door. Spesivtsev had lived alone with his aging mother for years. A quiet man, polite but strange. He'd once studied law, spoke softly, and kept to himself. Neighbors called him odd but harmless. No one imagined that inside his cramped Soviet flat, dozens of people had vanished. The case began with something small, a red liquid leaking from a drain pipe in the building's basement. Maintenance workers thought it was a plumbing issue until they realized it wasn't rust. It was blood. When police entered the apartment, they found dismembered remains, torn clothing, and evidence of unimaginable violence. But the most haunting thing in that room wasn't the gore, it was him, sitting there quietly, like a man reviewing the results of his own experiment. The interview. At the interrogation room, Spesivtsev spoke clearly and softly, his words deliberate, his tone disturbingly rational. When asked why, he replied simply, "I didn't hate them. I just wanted to understand people from the inside." He targeted the forgotten, the homeless, the runaways, the unwanted, those whose disappearances no one would notice. In a notebook recovered from his apartment, investigators found one line that chilled them to the core. "They never knew they existed. I helped them be remembered." A statement both logical and insane. The kind of reasoning that turns compassion into cruelty. A mother's silence. But Alexander wasn't alone. His mother, Lyudmila, knew everything. She didn't turn him in. She cleaned up. She burned things. She helped hide the horror. When asked why, she said only, "My son is sick, but whatever he is, he's still my son." The room fell silent. Because in that single sentence, love and monstrosity became one. A child of a broken era. Psychologists later called Spesivtsev a child of post-Soviet collapse, a man born into a world that had lost all structure, faith, and law. In a country where everything was falling apart, he sought control in the only way he could, by deciding who lived and who died. One investigator recalled, "When I looked into his eyes, I didn't see anger. I didn't see madness. I saw curiosity, like he was silently asking me, 'Why are you afraid of me when the world outside devours itself every day?'" The final words. At trial, Spesivtsev didn't deny a thing. He smiled faintly and said, "Everyone's a predator. I'm just the one who admits it." That sentence became infamous across Russia, a single phrase that captured the darkness of a nation unraveling after the fall of an empire. A time when hunger blurred into instinct, and reason dissolved into something far older, far colder. The predator that hides beneath the snow. Story 2. Katherine Knight, Australia's Bloody Bride. When police forced open the front door of a house in the town of Aberdeen, a smell hit them first, the heavy, coppery scent of meat being cooked. On the stove, a pot boiled fiercely. At the table, 2 place settings were laid out, knives and forks neatly arranged, napkins folded like flowers. It looked, at a glance, like an ordinary family dinner. Then an officer cried out, "My God, that's not beef!" On the kitchen floor lay the body of John Price, the man who had loved Katherine Knight. The sight froze every investigator in place. The room had been turned into a hellish kitchen where love and hatred had mixed into the sickly sweet tang of blood. Katherine Knight was no ordinary woman. She had worked in abattoirs since her teens and handled knives more skillfully than most men. Colleagues described her as strong, attractive, and dangerous as a blade. Her relationships were many, and they all ended in violence. A former lover once said, "When Katherine loved, she didn't want to share, and when she hated, she didn't share anyone." John Price was the last. A gentle, divorced man with 3 children, John thought Katherine was a tough, experienced woman who could care for him. Nobody could have predicted that love would end as one of the most gruesome crimes in Australia's history. She loved him so fiercely she wanted to possess him completely. Whenever they argued, she stalked him, threatened him, even drove a knife into a nearby wall in front of him. When John chose to leave, Katherine collapsed. She could not bear the idea of him being happy without her. She prepared for the final day methodically, calmly, with horrible care. That evening, she visited him as usual. She cooked, bathed, and waited for him to come home. John wasn't afraid. He assumed she wanted one last talk. They ate, they talked, and they went to sleep together. The next morning, he didn't show at work. Concerned coworkers called the police. They entered the house where the last dinner still steamed. When police arrested Katherine, she did not run. She sat calmly in the living room, in her nightgown, staring at the wall. On the table lay a crudely written note in which she said she had done what needed to be done to teach him a lesson. No sign of remorse, no tears. Psychiatrists later described her as someone with an extreme possessive personality disorder. When Katherine loved, she wanted to absorb the other person. If she could not have them in life, she would keep them in death. A form of omnipotent love, where love is no longer connection, but absolute possession. One psychiatrist summed it up. Katherine did not kill out of hatred. She killed because she believed death was the only way to make love permanent. Police never forgot the look in her eyes at trial. Not insane, not frenzied, simply a woman who believed she was right. When the judge sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole, she looked at no one and said quietly, "At least now he won't leave me." Those words chilled the courtroom. Katherine Knight became the first woman in Australian history to receive a whole life sentence with no possibility of parole. A bride of darkness where love is no longer an emotion, but a ritual of possession. Story 3. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Soul Hunter of Milwaukee. When Milwaukee police forced open apartment 213, they expected a routine call about a power outage. But when they opened the refrigerator, everything in that room, the air, the light, the world itself, seemed to stop. Inside were things that did not belong in the world of the living. Polaroids plastered the walls, capturing moments of horror created by one man, Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer was not like other killers. He did not kill in rage or for revenge, nor for simple bloodlust. He killed because he feared being alone. All his life, Dahmer wanted one thing: to keep someone with him forever. As a child, he was obsessed with death. He collected roadkill, dissected it, studied its structure, not from a clinical curiosity, but from a need to know how they were made. That loneliness in childhood became a quiet flame that grew unnoticed. As an adult, he lived alone in a small Milwaukee flat. By day, he worked at a brewery, reserved, quiet, unremarkable. By night, he prowled bars, looking for young men as lonely as he was. He invited them home with a smile, put on music, and they never left that room alive. What happened inside is too gruesome to detail. Dahmer would always say chillingly, "I didn't want them to hurt. I just didn't want them to leave." He tried, in his twisted way, to hold their souls inside the body using methods people still hesitate to speak about. In Dahmer's mind, love and death were two halves of the same idea: permanent possession. One night, he invited a man named Tracy Edwards back to his apartment. Tracy sensed something was wrong, the heavy odor in the air, Dahmer's hollow stare, and he feigned calm to escape. When he ran out and raised the alarm, Jeffrey Dahmer's secret world collapsed. Police found dozens of pieces of evidence, images, objects, notes, and a refrigerator containing things they had never imagined. Even so, what haunted them most was Dahmer's absolute calm as officers put on his handcuffs. At the station, he cooperated, reciting facts as if presenting a case study. No tears, no excuses. When asked why, he answered simply, "I know what I did was wrong, but at the time, I couldn't bear being alone." Psychologists called him someone who sought absolute love in the most grotesque way possible. He wasn't mad in the way we imagine madness. He was lucid, methodical, a soul starved of affection, starving until it consumed whatever it loved. Dahmer's trial became one of the most horrifying criminal proceedings in American history. Amid the outrage, some people still detected an overwhelming sadness in his eyes. A clergyman who met him in prison later said, "I didn't see a devil in his eyes. I saw a child who was never properly loved." Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to life in prison. Years later, he died behind bars. But the question he left echoes on. Dahmer was not simply a monster. He was a warped mirror reflecting modern humanity's loneliness, where love is deformed into possession, and isolation becomes an appetite no kindness can satisfy. 3 stories, 3 killers swallowed by solitude, who crossed the boundary where love and death meld. We fear them, yet somewhere in all of us lies a dormant instinct, waiting to be stirred. If you could choose, would you be angel or demon? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next files. This is Dark File, where the darkest dossiers are brought into the light.